Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly through the stone archways of a medieval convent, where the air smells faintly of damp limestone and boiled cabbage. And the only thing louder than the silence is your own heartbeat echoing in your ears. You're barefoot, of course. The sisters wake before the sun, long before the warmth. Your feet slap cold stone. Your woolen habit scratches your neck, and your breath mists in front of your face. You shuffle half asleep toward the chapel, guided only by candlelight and memory. Outside, frost has settled on the cloister courtyard, but that's not your concern. You've taken your vows, and with them, you've traded softness for sanctity. You live the rest of your days in a rhythm as precise as the tide. Pray, eat, work, pray again. But before all that, before you can even begin your day, you're expected to be clean. Well, cleanish. Don't get too excited. This isn't the kind of spa morning you're picturing. You're not slipping into bubbles, whirls, or anything remotely resembling comfort. You're not even guaranteed warm water. You'll wash with what the nuns before you washed with, water carried from the nearest well. Maybe a splash of vinegar if you're lucky, and a cracked ceramic bowl that's seen better centuries. And yes, you will be doing it all under supervision, because even cleanliness in this cloistered life has rules. Everything has rules. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and what time it is where you're watching. Always love seeing our sleepy little community from all over the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's dark. It's always dark when the bell rings from Athens, the midnight office. And just as you start to nod off again, Lord's follows just before sunrise. You rise because you must. The rule of Saint Benedict, the great rulebook of monastic life, does not allow for snoozing. The stone floor shocks your feet, the habit chafes, and as you huddle with the other sisters in your pew, the idea of bathing sounds absurd. Who would bathe before dawn? In this weather, you, apparently. Now, here's the first thing no one tells you. Medieval nuns didn't always bathe like modern people. Not every convent had a bathhouse. In many places, especially remote or poor communities, a bath meant standing over a basin while your neighbor poured a pitcher of frigid water over your head. Modesty required you to remain clothed, or at least partially so. Bathing fully nude was a scandalous luxury, one reserved for emergencies, illnesses, or sometimes death. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You're still alive, still shivering, and still trying to splash enough water on your face to not get a warning from the prioress. The water is shockingly cold, even colder than the air. It bites at your skin, makes your teeth ache. You try not to gasp too loudly. No unnecessary sounds. You wipe your face with a square of linen that doubles as your handkerchief, towel, and sometimes, let's be honest, washcloth. Then you smooth your veil and shuffle into morning prayers. It's here, in the stillness, that you notice something remarkable. Everyone smells the same. Not bad, not good, just the same. Like old wood and damp wool, with a whisper of lavender from the gardens. Maybe a hint of vinegar. You start to understand that this uniformity of scent is intentional. It's not about hygiene as we know it, it's about equality. No one is supposed to stand out. Not for beauty, not for voice, and certainly not for fragrance. In a world where class and gender defined your worth, the convent offered something wildly radical: sameness. At least in theory. But let's be honest, there were exceptions. Always are. Wealthy nuns brought dowries, and dowries bought better soap. Sometimes even their own private basins. Historians still argue whether this broke the vows of poverty or simply bent them into something more flexible. Still, you, the average sister, make do. You do your best to keep clean with what's available, which, in winter, isn't much. The convent stores water in barrels that freeze solid overnight. You chip at the surface with a ladle. You pretend you don't hear Sister Margaret muttering a psalm under her breath while trying not to curse the ice. You get used to it. That's the biggest surprise. Not the temperature, not the lack of privacy. The sheer adaptability of your body to routine, to restraint. You begin to understand what generations of women before you endured and why they endured it. Because here, even discomfort becomes devotion. Some nuns took pride in suffering. Others merely tolerated it. A furia and perhaps a bit mischievous found clever ways round it. There are whispered stories of sisters who warmed their water by hiding jugs near the kitchen oven, or of others who bartered extra candles to bathe by night when no one was watching. You file that idea away, just in case. Meanwhile, the chapel bell tolls again. It's time for work detail. You'll spend the next few hours in the herb garden, or copying psalms, or sewing altar cloths, all while damp, a little itchy, and probably still shivering. But you're clean, sort of, and for now, that's holy enough. The work bell stops echoing through the stone corridors just as you step into the outer cloister. A bundle of linen in one arm and a chipped jug of water balanced against your hip. You're on water duty today. It's less glamorous than it sounds. That is, if you ever thought it sounded glamorous. The well is outside the convent walls. That means you and Sister Alodia must trudge along the gravel path, through the orchard, and past the gatekeeper's postall before prime, the next prayer. It's a quiet walk. Just birdsong and footsteps, and the occasional grumble of a stomach. Neither of you hath eaten yet, and the air is still clinging to its icy dawn breath. You reach the well and lower the bucket. The creaking rope whines like it's been doing this for centuries, which, to be fair, it probably has. You brace yourself and crank. When the bucket returns, it's filled with water as cold as judgment, and only slightly cleaner than a duck pond. You and Alodia exchange a look. Good enough. Here's the thing. The medieval convent wasn't exactly a beacon of plumbing innovation. While some urban abbeys had access to rudimentary aqueducts or even private springs, most rural convents like this one had to work with whatever water source they could reach by foot. Clean water was valuable. Clean, asterisk asterisk hot asterisk asterisk water. That was legendary. You wonder, sometimes, what the monks get. Word is their abbey has a stone bath house with real drainage and even a fire-heated tank. Of course it does. Historians still argue whether gender equality was ever a real ambition of the early church, but the monks certainly seemed to draw the long straw on bathing technology. Back at the convent, water storage is inventive. Rain barrels sit under overhangs, waiting to catch drips from the thatched eaves. Large clay amphorae hold drinking water in the pantry. A separate cistern, likely blessed at least twice a year, stores the water used for rituals. And then there's your tub, if you can even call it that, more of a large ceramic basin the size of a sheep's trough. You carry the bucket back in silence, trying not to spill. Every drop counts. The courtyard smells faintly of rosemary and morning bread. In the center, an old stone channel curves like a serpent toward the cloister well house. It hasn't been used in years. One good storm filled it with silt, and the abbess deemed it a waste of effort to clear. When you get back, your arms ache. Sister Alodia does the lifting this time, pouring the water carefully into the copper kettle above the fireplace. She stokes the embers and looks at you meaningfully. You nod. This is your little secret. Warm water days. Against the official rule, you figured out that if you sneak water in early enough and stoke the fire before anyone else wicks, you can heat enough for a basin bath. It takes teamwork. It takes silence. You never talk about it with the others. You don't want to start a trend or a scandal. Because here's the secret risk. Too much washing was suspicious. It could be seen as vanity, or worse, heresy. Church authorities sometimes warned that excessive bathing, especially in warm water, opened the pores to temptation. Not just physical illness, mind you, but spiritual danger. The devil, apparently, loved warm skin. It sounds ridiculous now, but at the time, the logic checks out. Most of the nuns have read sermons warning against softness. To suffer discomfort is to share in Christ's passion, to seek warmth, ease, or even cleanliness for its own sake. That's pride, and pride is always the first crack in the soul. Still, you don't skip washing altogether. That's just impractical, especially when you're assigned to the kitchens, or to tending the sick, or to scrubbing the altar linens with lye and stiff brushes that shred your knuckles raw. You need water then. You deserve it then, even if you won't say it out loud. On feast days, you're sometimes allowed an extra pail of clean water for rinsing, especially before communion. It's not just symbolic. People could smell the difference between someone freshly washed and someone who'd been saving the same undertunic for a fortnight. And let's not kid ourselves, there were whispers. Remember Sister Meltrude? You can't forget. She refused to bathe on principle, said it brought her closer to the martyrs. After a month, she was moved to the herb garden permanently, to commune with the lavender, they said. The real reason was clear. Everyone within a 5-foot radius kept fainting. The abbess eventually suggested a bath as a favor to our Lord and his olfactory gifts. Ameltrude took it personally. She fasted for a week and wrote a sonnet about the purity of dirt. You didn't read it, but you heard it was surprisingly good. You pour yourself a half basin of heated water. Not hot, not even warm, really just a few degrees above freezing. You splash your face again. This time it doesn't sting quite so much. You rinse your hands, then your feet. Anything more than that would be noticed. You pat yourself dry with a square of linen that smells faintly of thyme and charcoal, and you tuck it under your arm as you move on to breakfast duty. The fire crackles in the kitchen. Sister Matilda is already kneading bread with knobby fists. She nods as you pass, eyes lingering on your flushed cheeks. She knows, but she doesn't say a word. You wonder if she remembers the days when she did the same. Probably. Everyone had their phase of rebellion. Yours just happens to involve lukewarm water and 5 minutes of peace. You are kneeling beside the low bench in the dormitory, adjusting your wimple for the 3rd time this morning because it keeps sliding off your freshly rinsed hairline. Not that it's slippery, just a little less matted than usual. A minor victory. Across the room, Sister Benedicta coughs into her sleeve and glares as if your veil is a personal affront. She's one of the old guard. Her linens are stiff with starch, her posture uncompromising, and her beliefs about female modesty would make a marble statue blush. She's probably wondering the same thing you used to. What exactly are you supposed to wear under this habit? The rule of Saint Benedict doesn't get too detailed about undergarments. Neither do most convent records. But what you do know is that layers mattered both for warmth and for virtue. At minimum, a linen shift covered the body under the habit. Some convents allowed an extra undertunic in winter. Others didn't. The ideal was simplicity, uniformity, and above all, modesty. But that doesn't mean it was comfortable. Now imagine that same shift is your only shift, and that it hasn't been washed in a week because you were on kitchen rotation and too exhausted to haul it down to the stream. You're itchy, you're cranky, you suspect the fleas are forming a union. Still, you endure. You endure because the alternative, asking for a second shift, means drawing attention. And the moment a nun draws attention for anything whispers begin. You remember the scandal with Sister Lutgard. She was accused of vanity for owning a soft woolen chemise. Just one, probably a gift from her noble cousin. But because it was dyed a faint rose-gray, barely perceptible to the untrained eye, she was accused of seduction by softness. That's right. The color **grey nearly got her removed from choir duty for a month. Historians still argue whether Lutgard's exile to the laundry wing was punishment or protection. Either way, she came back with calloused hands and an expression that said she would never trust linen dye again. So, back to the question. *** naked under that habit. *** not likely. In fact, some nuns wore multiple layers beneath the outer garment, especially in colder regions. Linen closest to the skin. Wool over that. Then the habit itself, a coarse outer garment of undyed wool that did not exactly whisper comfort. But here's the twist. Despite the layers, there was also a deep anxiety about bodily exposure. Even in all-female spaces, disrobing was rare and regulated. You never fully undressed unless you were ill, or dying, or preparing for ritual purification on high holy days. Baths were choreographed to avoid nudity. Eyes were lowered, voices were quiet, and towels, they were practically vestments. You learned to be quick with your shift, turning your back to others, eyes always averted. Sister Gisela, who's been here 10 years longer than you, has a method so efficient she could win a speed dressing competition. You try to emulate it, but it's hard not to fumble when the fabric clings to your skin and the floor is still wet from someone else's feet. Even the concept of ** dryness * becomes luxury. You never realized how much joy a dry shift could bring until you went 3 days without one. Oh, and underpants. Forget it. Medieval Europe wasn't particularly fond of them, and nuns were no exception. There are vague references in some medical texts about linen undergarments for discharges or illness, but most sisters simply layered tunics and trusted gravity. There's one record, just one from a 14th century German abbey, that describes a linen girdle for the purpose of chastity. Scholars have argued whether that meant a symbolic belt, a kind of medieval chastity garment, or just really uncomfortable underwear. You don't ask questions. You just hope it never ends up in your laundry pile. And let's not forget the climate. In winter, you freeze. In summer, you sweat. Either way, the fabric sticks to you in places you didn't even know you had places. And yet, no one complains aloud. The silence isn't just about reverence, it's about survival. Complaints draw scrutiny. Scrutiny leads to discipline. And discipline can mean days without firewood or reassignment to the piggery. Still, late at night, when the dormitory settles and the candles have got it out, you sometimes hear soft rustling, someone adjusting their shift, trying to scratch without scratching, or sighing just slightly louder than usual. It's a shared language. You're all uncomfortable. You're all trying to pretend you aren't. You begin to understand the psychology of fabric. The way linen can shape your day. The way damp wool can become a kind of moral burden. You wonder if the church fathers ever considered what happens when chastity becomes chafing. Occasionally, a traveling friar or bishop passes through, preaching purity with gleaming hands and a well-brushed robe. You watch him dismount from his horse, shake the dust off his hem, and pronounce a homily on virtue. You try not to imagine what *** he ** is wearing underneath. Probably more than you, and cleaner. You kneel again, adjust your veil, whisper the last of your morning prayers. You know that today, you'll scrub pods, clean the dormitory floors, and maybe, if the schedule allows, sneak a half-bath behind the herb shed. But first, you'll fold your shift neatly, hang it over the crossbar by the window, and hope that the sun blesses you with even 1 hour of warmth. Because here, under layers of linen and rules, modesty isn't just a virtue. It's a stand quietly in the washing alcove, waiting your turn at the basin. The sun has crept just high enough to paint the stone walls in dusty yellow light, and a thin column of steam curls lazily from the kettle beside you. It's the weekly scheduled bath day, not a spa day, not a treat, a rule. And rules are everything. You learned early on that bathing in a convent wasn't about pleasure, it was about discipline. The rule of Saint Benedict doesn't say treat yourself when grimy. It says, the brothers shall bathe according to the needs of the body and the seasons, And what applies to brothers eventually, with grudging ecclesiastical adjustments, applies to sisters too. Sort of. You're allowed to wash, yes, but not when you want, and definitely not how you want. Most convents established a bathing schedule typically once a week for the entire community, often on Fridays. Friday, you might recall, being the day associated with Christ's Passion, a time for penitence, for cleansing, both spiritual and sort of physical, but not too physical, because bathing too frequently was considered indulgent, almost sinful. Why would a holy woman concern herself with cleanliness? After all, when her soul is the real thing that needs scrubbing. There are sermons from the air, some downright snarky, that accuse frequent bathers of caring more about their skin than their salvation. Cleanliness is next to godliness, may be embroidered on your modern tea towel. But back then it came with a suspicious glare and a list of exceptions. So you wait. The copper kettle's water will be shared between 5 of you. Sister Cecile goes first, she's elderly, and no one questions it. Then Sister Agnes, who is rumored to have mild consumption, though she insists it's just a spiritual cough. You're third. The water by now is cloudy and tepid. You strip quickly, leaving your shift draped on a peg. You keep your chemise on, of course. Total nudity, that's reserved for medical emergencies and death rites. Instead, you kneel into the wide basin, hunching forward so your body creates as few visible curves as possible. Modesty above comfort. Always, you ladle water over your shoulders. It runs down your back like a cold confession. The soap is little more than a fist-sized lump of lye and animal fat, coarse and caustic. You rub it between your hands, careful to avoid sensitive skin. Too much will leave you red and raw. Too little, and someone might notice your smell in chapel. Some abbeys used ash or clay instead of soap, cheaper, easier to produce in bulk, and less likely to cause an argument over vanity oils. You heard once that a convent in southern France banned olive oil entirely after a novice tried to condition her hair with it. Her penance involved a week of root cellar isolation and recitation of Psalms 119. All of it. Historians still debate whether that story is real or just convent gossip, but either way, you're not risking it. Your bath lasts exactly 3 minutes. You're aware of every second. Behind you, Sister Margaret clears her throat. A polite reminder, your time's up. You towel off with the same linen you used yesterday. It's still damp, but at least it doesn't smell like cabbage. You wring your chemise as best you can, hang it on the peg beside your shift, and step into a fresh tunic. It's scratchy, woven too tight in the sleeves, and has a mysterious stain that looks suspiciously like ink from last week's salt scrubbing. But it's dry, and dry feels like a benediction. You glance at the bath water. It's now a pale, cloudy gray with flecks of hair and herbs floating on the surface. You realize Sister Beatrix is next. She doesn't complain. She never does. You respect that. And yet, you wonder, as you pat your face with a cool cloth, why it's considered virtuous to share filthy water, to submit without question. Is it solidarity, or is it simply control? You've heard whispers, cautious whispers about communities of beguines and lay sisters who bathed more freely, even privately. Radical, perhaps. Liberated, definitely. Their customs weren't governed by Rome, but by practicality. They washed when they needed to, not when the bell demanded it. But those women lived on the fringe, independent, unofficial, and often suspected of heresy. One of them was rumored to have owned a copper bathtub with carved feet. Decadence. Someone gasped at dinner once, as if she'd said the word gambling or cinnamon. Still, part of you dreams of that tub. Back in the dormitory, Sister Clothilde fans her chemise dry with a wooden paddle. It smells faintly of thyme and old beeswax. She smiles at you, a rare moment of warmth. She whispers, "Next week, you go first. I'll trade you kitchen duty." You nod, and for a moment, the strictness of the rulebook softens under the quiet rebellion of two women just trying to stay clean. You return to the chapel with damp hair tucked beneath your veil and a towel folded in the crook of your arm. Your feet are clean. Your conscience. That depends. Because bathing isn't just a rule. It's a ritual. A negotiation between piety and practicality. Between what your body needs and what the church expects. And sometimes, those things don't quite align. The Bathe house is quiet now, if you can even call it a house. It's more of a stone-lined closet tucked behind the vestry, with one small window that lets in more spider than sunlight. You're standing there again, holding a dented basin in one hand and your dignity in the other. Tonight's bath is different. It's not your scheduled day. It's the result of an unfortunate turn in the herb garden, where you slipped in the mud during your turn with the watering cans. Your habit is streaked with grime, and your knees still sting from gravel. You're technically permitted to watch under supervision. That's where Sister Justina comes in. Justina is what the old nuns call a hawk in a coif. She guards modesty like it's a relic of the true cross. You once saw her reprimand Sister Odila for adjusting her veil too flirtatiously. Odila had a head cold. That didn't matter. So, when you kneel beside the wash basin and Justina stands by the doorway like a penitential gargoyle, you know this isn't going to be one of your more relaxing evenings. Bathing in the convent is never private. It's communal, controlled, supervised. Some convents even had rules that prohibited more than one nun being completely disrobed at a time, and even then, it was strongly advised to keep one shift on. The concept of modesty didn't pause just because someone needed to scrub behind their ears. You remember reading about one 12th century abbey where bathing was performed in groups of 3. One to bathe, one to assist, and one to watch. Like a very uncomfortable relay race. Historians still argue whether this was about ensuring chastity or simply about preventing scandal. After all, if no one was ever alone, then no one could be accused of indiscreet behavior. In theory, you dip a rag into the basin and begin wiping the mud from your legs. The water is already cold. You grit your teeth and press on, trying to keep your composure as Justina watches with the serenity of a gargoyle on high alert. But then, something odd happens. She speaks, "Make sure to clean under your fingernails. Dirt there, confessor." It's not unkind. It's practical. Startling, even. You glance up, unsure if it's a trick. She softens, just a little. "When I was a novice, I thought cleanliness was pride," she says, her voice quieter now. "Then I saw a sister lose half her foot to rot. Piety doesn't excuse poor hygiene." You blink. That might be the most human thing she's ever said. You continue washing in silence, but now with a strange sense of permission. Not indulgence, just maintenance, like repairing a roof or sharpening a sickle. The bath ends, as always, with a damp towel and a quick, chaste robe up. Justina nods, satisfied, and leaves without another word. You're alone now, and for a moment you breathe, really breathe, and notice how your skin tingles with something almost forgotten comfort. Back in the dormitory, the other sisters are preparing for convent. You slide into your pallet, your habit freshly folded beside you, and your damp shift hanging on the wall hook. Sister Hildegard leans over from her bunk and whispers, "She watched you, didn't she?" You nod. "She always does," she replies. "But she used to watch me worse. Caught me humming once during bath hour. Said melody was a temptation." You both stifle laughter into your sleeves. The convent is quiet, The laughter tiny and rebellious. There's an art to communal bathing. You learn to keep your eyes low. You learn to fold cloth without revealing too much. You learn that silence isn't always spiritual, it's strategic. A shared silence between women who understand that privacy isn't a right here, but a luxury too suspicious to afford. Still, moments of solidarity bloom. Someone leaves a sliver of soap next to your basin. Another warms your towel by the oven stone. Tiny gestures that say, "I see you. I understand." Not every nun embraces it, of course. Sister Euphemia insists on performing her ablutions alone in the infirmary basin. She claims her constitution is too delicate for communal air. Most think she just doesn't want to be seen without her elaborate head wrap. Some say she has all her hair still, long and wavy. Scandalous, possibly mythical, but even Euphemia can't avoid the rules. Every sister must present for the seasonal hygiene review. That's when the abbess herself, with the authority of Christ and at least 3 bishops, reviews the convent's standards of bodily upkeep. It's awkward, it's cold, it's usually on a Tuesday. You remember your first review. You didn't even know where to stand. The abbess lifted your sleeve, examined your arm for signs of rashes or lice, then moved on to your scalp. She didn't speak, just nodded once and motioned you away. You were clean enough. For now. That's the thing no one tells you when you enter the convent. You imagine it's about prayer, devotion, charity. And it is, but it's also about logistics. How do 50 women live together in silence, immoral, without central heating or plumbing? The answer lies in the bath schedule, the surveillance, the modesty rituals that are half spiritual, half bureaucratic. You lie back now on your straw-filled mattress, your skin still faintly warm from the friction of drying. Your shift smells like thyme and smoke. You feel, impossibly, almost human. Above you, a single candle flickers. Shadows dance across the ceiling beams. The day is done, and for a moment, you wonder if you bathe again tomorrow. Would anyone really know? It's laundry day. Not the glamorous kind with crisp white sheets snapping on a clothesline, but the medieval kind, where your knuckles go numb before breakfast and soap is a matter of chemical warfare. You're crouched beside the convent's watch trench, a long stone basin fed by a sluggish stream, and the water is colder than confession. Your task, scrub the communal shafts, all of them. And guess what? There's no lavender detergent here, no sweet citrus suds or softeners, just a bucket of grayish water, a bar of something that technically qualifies as soap, and the pile of tunics so stained with sweat and ink that you question how they're still holding together. The soap today is a mix of lye and tallow, boiled down by the lay sisters last week. It smells like wet ash and something vaguely barnyard. One chunk sits in your hand like a weapon. You scrape it across the coarse wool, watching it foam not white, but grey, and begin scrubbing with a brush that could double as a punishment tool. Here's the thing, asterisk asterisk, you're not bathing today, asterisk asterisk, but the tools of cleanliness, the water, the soap, the scrub are all still in your hands. Washing clothing in the convent is as sacred, in its own damp, aching way, as washing your body. And for some nuns, it's the only kind of washing they get. You learned quickly that actual bathing might happen once a week. But laundry, that's constant, not because of vanity, but because unwashed garments were breeding grounds for lice, rot, and moral suspicion. If someone's shift smelled foul in the chapel, questions would follow. Not from the abbess, no, she rarely noticed, but from Sister Benedicta, or the other sharp-nosed guardians of communal decency. Still, it's not easy. Some habits weigh nearly 10 pounds when soaked. Dragging them through the basin feels like wrangling reluctant ox. Your fingers ache from wringing, your knees ache from kneeling, and your back, well, it's given up complaining altogether. And don't even think about skipping corners. One missed armpit stain and you'll find yourself assigned to privy duty for a week. So you scrub, You dunk, you wring, you repeat. Some days you add ash to the water, wood ash from the kitchen hearth, because it binds with grease and lifts it from the fabric. It's not perfect. Sometimes it just adds a new layer of grime. Other days, you sprinkle thyme or rosemary into the rinse water, not because it helps the fabric, but because it helps the nose. Herbal rinse water was a trick passed down by Sister Alodia. She swore that a few sprigs of mint tucked into a folded shift could disguise even the worst post-bath reek. Whether or not that's true is anyone's guess, but it smells better than despair. You glance over at the drying racks, ropes strung between two leaning beams in the cloister courtyard. Today's sun is feeble, barely warming your hands, but it's enough to keep the linens from freezing solid. There's something meditative about this task. The rhythm, the repetition. You start humming a mistake. Sister Justina pokes her head around the cloistered pillar and raises an eyebrow. You stop. You always stop. Later, in the refectory, your fingers are still pruned and tingling. You chew your bread with the soft resentment of someone who's worked harder than the bread is worth. But the smell your shift, your sleeves, it's cleaner. Earthy, maybe, but not offensive. You sit a little straighter. Then, just as you're about to sip your wheat turnt broth, you hear the shuffle of sandals behind you. It's Sister Gertrude. She leans in and whispers. The sleeve hems were washed crooked. You freeze. You'll fix them tomorrow. Otherwise, the folds will sit wrong during Mass. She's not being cruel. Not exactly. Just observant. Gertrude was a laundress before taking her vows, and she still carries the pride of a perfectly creased sleeve like it's a liturgical mandate. So you nod, because that's what you do. Back in the dormitory, your body aches. You lie on your side, fingers tucked under your arms to warm them. You smell of lye, damp linen, thyme. It's not unpleasant. It's honest. Historians still argue whether convent labor like laundry was a means of humility or a method of control. Probably both. But for you, in this moment, it feels like something else entirely. Survival. You remember the fringe communities again, the beguines, the anchoresses, the women who chose have freedom over full piety. They washed when they pleased, wore what they wanted, died in their own homes, not in dormitories lined with silent bodies and rows of damp, folded habits. But they weren't here. They didn't scrub your shift. They didn't learn how to twist the fabric just so that it dries evenly overnight. You did, and somehow, in that small act of keeping cloth from mold, of lifting mud with nothing but soap and spite, you feel a kind of power. It's not the glory of martyrdom, not the brilliance of a stained glass saint, but it's yours, and sometimes that's enough. You're hunched over a stool, combing your fingers through your hair by candlelight. The strands are stiff, damp, and reluctant, tangled into knots that feel like punishment. There's no mirror, of course. You rely on feel, on muscle memory, on prayer, and maybe a little luck. Hair care in the convent is complicated. In fact, it's more than just grooming, it's theology wrapped in keratin. When you first arrived, you still had long hair, not styled, not perfumed like the noble women, but long enough to braid, long enough to feel the weight of it on your back, long enough to be seen as a potential temptation. That was the problem. On your second day, the abbess asked you gently, firmly, whether you would take the scissors or let Sister Ermeltrude do it. You took them yourself. Better to surrender voluntarily than be shorn like a lamb. The lock of hair you cut landed on the stone floor like a fallen relic. One sister gathered it reverently and burned it in the courtyard stove. Another crossed herself. You weren't sure if that was for your soul or your follicles. Historians still argue whether full head shaving was standard for all nuns. Some records suggest only choir nuns, those who recited the divine office, were obliged to cut their hair completely. Others claim the practice varied by region, order, or whim of the abbess. In wealthier abbeys, you might get to keep your hair braided beneath a veil. In stricter ones, you were bald before your first feast day. Here in your convent, the custom is seasonal shaving. Twice a year, your head is tonsured, cut close to the scalp. Though never fully bare, the sisters call it the mowing, usually with a wry grin. It's done in the garden shed, with scissors so blunt they could barely injure a carrot. And yet, somehow, they still manage to nick your ear. You rub your temple now, still tender from yesterday's trimming. The stubble bristles against your fingers. It's humbling, not humiliating, not exactly, but close. There's a kind of solidarity in it. You all look similar, cloistered unity enforced by clippers. Still, you remember the first time you saw Sister Euphemia slip off her veil during fevered dreams. Her hair waist-length, ash blonde, and touched by blades shimmered in the moonlight like something out of a legend. No one talks about it, but you saw it. So did the infirmary novice, who dropped her cup and whispered, "Saint." No, just rebellion wrapped in silk. You brush your own scalp again, sighing as loose hairs fall into your lap. You gather them, fold them into a scrap of linen, and tuck them under your mattress. Some say if you burn them, it invites headache. Others say it wards off demons. You're not interested in testing either theory. Once upon a time, you used herbs for your hair: rosemary, nettle, maybe a rinse of vinegar if someone slipped you an extra ration. Now, with the tonsure, maintenance is minimal. Still, scalp care matters. You learned that the hard way during your first winter, when the dry air cracked your skin and left you scratching like a penitent possessed. Sister Clothel taught you to mash boiled oats into a paste and dab it on with a rag. You thought she was joking. Then it worked. Now you use it twice a month, hiding the mush under your pillow until it's cool enough to spread. You once asked, very cautiously, why the abbess herself keeps a head covering even at night. Sister Justina leaned in and whispered. Her hair grew back. No further questions. Harry's political here. When the bishop visits, every sister is expected to have her veil starched flat. No wisps, no strays, no unruly signs of the flesh, as he once described them during a sermon about vanity. You could see Sister Matilda's eye twitch when he said it. She later claimed she had lint in her lashes. You know better. Hair, in this place, is more than fiber. It's a boundary, a battleground, an offering. And yet when you dream, sometimes it grows. You imagine it trailing behind you in golden waves as you race through a meadow. No veil, no scissors, no stern abbess with a measuring stick. Just wind and warmth and the unfamiliar sensation of being untamed. You wake up and your head feels cold. Still, you smile. Because even here, in the tight routine of scraping lysope across your scalp and tucking what remains under a starched stiff veil, you carry that memory, that moment, that meadow. It's enough. You rise from your stool, tuck away your cloth, wrap your veil tight. Tomorrow is another bath rotation, another laundry shift, another day of scrubbing the body down to its barest humility. But tonight, for just a moment, you run your fingers over the fine fuzz of your scalp and feel something almost like pride. Not vanity, not rebellion, just survival. You're gripping a square of fraying linen like it's sacred relic cloth. To you, right now, it sort of is. This towel, if you can even call it that, is your only personal textile. Your companion in steamless bathing. Your shield in modesty. Your single soft buffer against the daily indignities of medieval hygiene. You've patched it 3 times. The edges are worn, the weave so loose it's practically see-through. But it's yours, assigned, recorded and counted. Monasteries didn't do extra of anything, not bedding, not soap, and especially not towels. You drape it across your shoulder as you head toward the washroom. It's your turn again. The rotation never ends. In wealthier abbeys, there were communal towels, long bolts of linen mounted on wooden rollers, like parchment for bodies. You read about them once in a borrowed rule book. Every sister would pull the cloth a bit further along their beam after drying, always using a fresh section. In theory, anyway. In practice, you'd wager it got circular. Here in your convent, the towel system is more personal. One towel per nun. If it's stolen, you report it. If it's lost, you're reprimanded. If it's borrowed, you learn how to spot yours by smell and embroidery thread. Yours has a red cross stitched into one corner. Sloppy work your hands were shaking the day you marked it, but distinct. You glance at it now, checking for damp. Still cool from last use. That's normal. It never truly dries. There's too much air moisture and not enough sun. Back in your first month, you hung your towel in the wrong place outside, on the southern fence. A raven took it. Or maybe Sister Matilda. Hard to tell. You had to scrub yourself dry with your chemise that day, which isn't recommended by anyone with skin. You learned to hang it under the chapel eaves after that, behind the bell rope. It's shadowy, a little dusty, but safer. But let's talk towel texture, shall we? This isn't your post-shower fluff from the future. Medieval towels were flat-woven linen, coarse but durable. You don't pat yourself dry so much as buff yourself. It's closer to polishing a candlestick than drying off. The weave lifts grime more than moisture, and if you're not careful, it'll leave your skin pink and stung. The irony, that sting feels good after a cold wash. It brings blood back to your hands. Your fingers come alive again. It's strange how pain, in this place, often signals progress. Some sisters had sent to their towels a trick passed down from older nuns. They rubbed dried mint into the threads or tie thyme sachets to the drying line. Once, Sister Gertrude soaked hers in wine vinegar. The abbess gave her a 3-day silence punishment for wasteful ostentation, but her towel never smelled like mildew again. Historians still argue whether personal towels were universal or reserved for more elite convents. Inventories vary. Some mention cloths of ablution. Others list strips for drying with no ownership attached. But you know how it works here. If you don't guard it, you lose it. And when you lose it, you dry off with what's left You've seen it happen. Sister Juliana dropped hers into the privy trench. Irretrievable. The abbess forbade her from getting a new one until the next quarterly inventory. For 2 months, she had dried by the kitchen hearth. Her hair never fully recovered. Neither did her mood. You're not taking that risk. After today's washing, you unpan your towel from the hook, careful not to tug the frayed seam and press it to your arms, your back, your face. The cloth smells faintly of firewood and yesterday's basil. You take your time. The warmth it retains, minimal though it is, makes this feel almost like a moment of luxury. You remember what Sister Clothilde once whispered, the towel is the last dignity. She wasn't wrong, because when your shift is soaked and your veil hangs limp and your knees are red from kneeling, that sliver of cloth reminds you you're still human. You hang it again, red cross facing out. It's a marker, a claim, a silent little flag of personhood fluttering in a world ruled by obedience and cold stone. One time, you thought about making a second towel. Secretly, you even cut a piece from an old altar cloth, hoping to pass it off as a donation. But you couldn't bring yourself to finish. It felt too much like cheating, like vanity, like having more than you were supposed to. So you keep the one. You mend it. You wash it with your hands, kneeling beside the cistern in moonlight, whispering a prayer not out of piety but to keep your breath steady in the cold. And tonight, as you slide between scratchy sheets in your narrow cot, your damp skin cooling under the covers, you know the towel hangs clean and folded, waiting for tomorrow's battle. It's small, but in this world, small is survival. It's laundry day again. But this time, it's not your own garments you're scrubbing, it's the convent's linens. The altar cloths, the table runners, the napkins for the guest hall, and perhaps most sacred of all, the abbess's personal washcloth. You're kneeling beside the stream, icy water swirling round your ankles as you pound rhythmically on a stone slab. Round you, a quiet chorus of thumps, sloshes, and muttered songs creates the soundtrack to every convent's most humbling labor. Washing isn't just a chore. Here, in this cloistered life, it's a form of devotion. You're not just removing mud from a hem. You're removing pride, vanity, the worldly stain of self. That's what they tell you. Anyway, you dip the cloth again, rub it with ash paste and lavender stems. Scrub until your knuckles go pink and your shoulders ache from repetition. Then, wring, rinse, repeat. It's strange how the rhythm becomes a kind of meditation. You start repeating scripture lines under your breath, not consciously, just reflexively. The movement syncs with the sound, a strange unity of body and soul. Create me a clean heart, O God, you whisper, and a clean sleeve. If he's feeling generous, you glance to your left. Sister Agnes is ringing out an altar runner like she's fighting Satan himself. To your right, Sister Cecilia is meticulously folding each item before it even dries. You suspect she dreams in linen origami. There are no jokes spoken aloud, but the silence is friendly, collaborative. You pass soap when asked. You share your scrubbing rock with the novice who's yet to grow calluses. You even swap drying spots when the sun shifts, or without a word. It's communion without the bread. And then, the inevitable happens. A sharp wind gusts across the river bank. You instinctively reach to secure the altar cloth beside you to slow. It sails like a holy flag into the current. Your stomach drops. This isn't just any cloth. This one bore the wine and wafer of last Sunday's Mass. It's been sanctified, bleached with vinegar, ironed between planks of blessed wood. You chase it, not with screams, not with panic that's not allowed. You run silently, sandals slapping wet grass, eyes locked on the bobbing corner of light. You wade in waist deep before catching it, soaked and sullied with algae. Sister Benedicta will definitely have a comment. You trudge back, shivering, the cloth clutched like contraband. But no one scolds you. Not yet. Sister Clothilde simply takes it, lays it out across a heated stone, and starts blotting with a rag. Rebaptized, she murmurs with a soft smile. You exhale. It's moments like these that make you realize, in the convent, laundry is never just about fabric. It's about vigilance, control, redemption. Historians still argue whether the strict laundry rituals were primarily sanitary or symbolic. Were they designed to protect the body or to suppress it? The truth is, it's both. Because when you're on laundry duty, you see everything. The frayed seams, the blood spots, the scorch marks from candles held too close. Every garment carries a story, a slip, a struggle, a memory. And your job, your blessing is to make it pure again. You dry the linens in rows across the cloister hedge, pinned with wooden clips whittled by the groundskeeper. The breeze helps, so does the sun, though it's half-hearted today. You mutter a prayer for clear skies. And then there's the abbess's towel. It's always washed separately. No one knows why. Just one of those rules handed down from some ancient decree. You take it carefully, dipping it into a separate basin filled with chamomile steeped water. You rub it gently. Too rough, and you might loosen the embroidery. Too soft, and you risk leaving oils behind. There's no winning, only obedience. Later that evening, your hands are red and raw. The tips of your fingers are wrinkled like tree bark, and the skin across your knuckles has split in 3 places. You smear a bit of beeswax on them from the infirmary stores, not enough to heal, just enough to stop the sting. Sister Juliana pauses by, nods, and says, "Your folds were even today." It's the highest praise you've had in weeks. Back in the dormitory, You rest your head on your rolled-up cloak, too tired to even think. But as sleep creeps in, you find yourself comforted not by psalms or prophecy, but by the knowledge that every sister will dry her hands tomorrow with cloths you made clean. That someone's prayer will fall on a linen you purified. That even here, in the smallest acts, you make the sacred just a little less stained. The bell rings, but no one rises from their pallets right away, because it's those asterisk years again. The ones whispered about with stiff mouths and downturned eyes. The plague years, and in a convent this size, with this many bodies sharing stone walls and cold air, sickness spreads faster than gossip. You wrap your shift tight around yourself and glance toward the dormitory door. It's been left cracked open for airflow, as Sister Justina ordered. Fresh air, she says, is the best defense against foul humors. That and faith. But you're not sure how much longer either can hold. Out in the cloister, the laundry basins sit untouched. No one wants to handle garments worn by the sick. No one wants to pour warm water over skin that might already carry death beneath it. The bath schedule, suspended. You'd think cleanliness would become more important, but the opposite happens. Asterisk warm water becomes suspect. Asterisk you overheard it 2 days ago in the refectory. Warmth opens the pores, lets the disease in. You didn't catch who said it. Voices are low these days, but the idea has taken root. Cold washes only, minimal contact, minimal exposure. You wash now like you're scrubbing a ticking clock. Quick, efficient, nervous. No one sings at the basins anymore. There's talk always quietly of places where entire convents went untouched by the plague. Sacred immunity, some say. Divine favor. Others whisper about ritual fumigations, baths laced with sulfur and vinegar, or linen boiled until it wept dye into the fire. One sister claims a convent in Avignon submerged their entire laundry store in rose water and hung them on the cathedral rafters. Historians still argue whether these were acts of sanitation or desperation. You just want to survive the week. You're called to the infirmary today not because you're sick, but because Sister Benedicta collapsed in the chapel. Midnight. You help carry her to the cot, your shoulder pressed into her side, her breath heavy with something that rattles. The infirmary has its own washing basin, tucked into the corner like a guilty secret. It's small, copper, and ringed with stains from every herb and vinegar rinse the sisters have thrown at it over the years. You fill it with cold water, a thyme, a pinch of sage, a little salt if the steward isn't watching. You wash Benedicta's hands first. They're thin and shaking, bones like reeds. Her palms are streaked with blue veins, her nails dark with dirt from the garden. You clean gently, as if repentance is caught between her knuckles. And then you bathe her face, a cloth dipped in your makeshift tonic, run out just enough to leave a trail of chill down her cheeks. Her eyes flutter, but she doesn't speak. You wonder what it feels like to be washed by someone else, in silence, with no pride left, no rules to uphold. You rinse the cloth and do it again. Later, when she sleeps, you wash her linens. Not with soap. There's none to spare. Just ash water, boiled hard and cooled in the courtyard. You scrub the edges. Avoid the stains near the seams. You dry them on the infirmary windowsill, where the breeze is warmer. It's strange, this new hygiene of fear. You remember when bathing was choreographed, communal. Now it's solitary, swift, secret. Even Sister Euphemia no longer insists on her private sessions. She hasn't left her cot in days. You heard she asked for her towel to be burned. The vinegar didn't help, someone whispered. One morning, a wagon arrives outside the convent gates. It's covered with canvas, pulled by two men who wear scarves across their faces. They do not speak. You don't ask who they're here for. You just keep scrubbing. By week's end, the abbess calls a chapter meeting in the garden. The sisters gather at intervals to paces apart, veils tied tight. Her voice is raspy. She announces that all bathing will be suspended until further notice. Water is to be used only for drinking and preparing meals. No exceptions. You don't argue, but you do notice more buckets outside dormitory doors at night. Silent washings, stealth rinses with moonlight and rainwater. You pretend not to see. They do the same for you, because what no rule can account for, what no bishop, abbess, or plague decree can fully suppress is the basic human need to feel clean to wash the fear from your skin. To feel your own hands in water and remember that, at least for now, you are still alive. You sit at the infirmary bedside one evening, cloth in hand, and repeat the quiet ritual. Forehead, cheeks, hands. The water is colder now. Benedicta does not stir. You fold the towel in silence. Set it beside her pillow. It's stained, but it's the cleanest thing in the room. It's the night before St. Agnes's feast day, and you're sitting on the edge of your pallet, combing through your shift for signs of wear. This is the one time of year when you know for certain you'll get a full body wash. A warm one. Your heart flutters just thinking about it. You can already hear the firewood popping in the convent's old kitchen hearth, the copper kettle hissing faintly, the dry rustle of towels being fetched from the cedar chest. This is it. The annual indulgence. Feast day bathing. For most of the year. Your relationship with water is like a relationship with joy, cautious, conditional, and strictly supervised. But on certain feast days, Agnes, Claire, Mary Magdalene, there's a softening of the convent sign grip. A small gesture, a little mercy, for one night only. You can cleanse in warmth. Sister Clothilde once called it Holy Spa Night. She got a glare from Sister Justina, but you could tell she meant it affectionately. You gather your things early. Everyone does. The bath queue is silent but frantic. You watch as Sister Gertrude checks her linen twice, then a third time, smoothing the corners with deliberate care. Even the sternest sisters become almost giddy in their stillness, a shared anticipation moving through the dormitory like incense. The feast day bath follows a strict order, of course. Eldest sisters go first, then the infirm, then the rest of you, in the precise sequence listed in the rota pinned to the refectory wall. You're number 11 tonight. Not great, not terrible. The bath itself is in the same basin as always, but tonight it's been scrubbed with extra vinegar and mint leaves. Someone even lit candles. Candles. It's like stepping into a chapel. Except this chapel smells faintly of thyme and smoke. You sit beside the fire while you wait. Your shift already loosened. Towel folded neatly in your lap. The warmth wraps round you like a whispered hymn. It's been weeks since your fingers weren't stiff with cold. Now they're softening, relaxing. When your name is called, you rise almost reverently. The water is still warm. That alone feels like a miracle. You kneel beside the basin, splash your face, your arms, your legs. You pour it slowly, luxuriously, over your scalp, and close your eyes as the warmth trickles down your back. You scrub with real soap softened with goat fat and rosemary, and for once, it doesn't leave you raw. You take your time. Not too long, just enough. Outside, the other sisters wait. They don't rush you. They understand. Because tonight isn't about dirt. It's about dignity. Even the abbess allows herself a rinse, though she does so late, when the others are gone. You hear the faint creak of the door after midnight, the whisper of robes on stone, the slow splash of water. No one says a word. Feast day baths aren't just about the body. They're about resetting the soul. You step out of the basin with steam rising round you like incense, and for the first time in weeks, you feel more than clean. You feel human. You wrap yourself in your linen towel, now warmed by the hearth, and exhale. A deep breath, one that doesn't sting your lungs with cold or duty. Just air, just presence. The towel smells faintly of cedar, A reminder that the cedar chest is opened only twice a year for the abbess's feast garments and for the good towels. They are soft. They are stitched with floral patterns, remnants of a noble woman's forgotten dowry. Tonight, they are yours. Later, after the bathing is finished, the sisters gather in the chapel for compline. The psalms feel fuller tonight, the harmony tighter. The room smells like lavender and candle wax. You kneel and feel no dampness in your sleeves, no chill clinging to your skin, just stillness. After prayers, you lie in your cot with hair still faintly damped but not dripping. You rest your head on your folded robe and whisper your thanks, not to any specific saint though Agnes seems appropriate, but to the small, anonymous grace that lets a basin of warm water feel like a gift from heaven. Historians still debate whether feast day bathing was a universal custom or a privilege of wealthier convents. Some argue it was symbolic, not practical. Others point to records of linen rotations and firewood allotments carefully timed to liturgical calendars. You don't care what the scholars decide. All you know is that once a year, you are allowed to feel new, and that is enough. You're scrubbing your feet in a shallow copper bowl beside the refectory fire, and for once, you're alone. Not because it's your scheduled bath time, and not because it's a feast day, but because of something even rarer. Asterisk asterisk, you've been summoned to the abbess's quarters. Asterisk asterisk. And that means you're about to step into a place few sisters ever see and few still discuss. The abbess's room is cloistered within the main convent building, hidden behind heavy oak doors and centuries of reverence. The stone walls are lined with tapestries that have known better decades, and the hearth burns almost constantly, thanks to privileges accorded to her rank. But the most shocking thing of all, asterisk asterisk, she has her own bathtub. Asterisk asterisk, not a basin, not a shared trench, a real, freestanding wooden tub, ringed in iron and sealed with wax. Big enough to sit in, deep enough to submerge. You saw it once when the door was cracked just a flash, but the image has haunted your memory ever since. Now you're here, standing before it. The abbess isn't ill. She's not dying. She's simply asked for assistance with her monthly ablutions. And you, for reasons unknown, have been selected. You carry in the heated water from the kitchen kettle. You pour it into the tub, bucket by bucket, until steam curls into the air and the room begins to smell like rosemary, sweat, and smoke. The abbess sits by the window, reading a small leather-bound book. She doesn't look up as you prepare the towel. You've brought your best, the one with the red-stitched corner, and laid it beside the tub like an offering. She rises silently. You turn your back. Always, modesty, even for those with rank, is carefully preserved. You hear the shift of fabric, the soft slosh of water, a quiet sigh of comfort, relief. You don't dare guess. What you do notice, though, is the silence. Not tense, not cold. Peaceful bathing here is not rushed, not shared, not barked over by Sister Justina or crammed into a rigid rota. It unfolds slowly, with intention, like a ritual, but private. You wonder if she feels guilty. Probably not. Historians still debate whether abbesses were granted bathing privileges as a matter of rank or necessity. Some abbeys had written clauses allowing the head sister private access to bathing vessels, herbs, and firewood as needed for health and discipline. Others made no mention, suggesting the practice was assumed and perhaps a little taboo to document. The abbess, of course, would never speak of it publicly, but the evidence is all round. The bath oils on the shelf, the silver-handled comb, the discreet linen pile that no one ever sees carried to the washroom. She finishes. You hear the water shift, then settle. She steps out. You hold out the towel behind you, arms extended. She takes it, dries quietly. You remain facing the wall. Then, her voice, "Thank you." You nod. Later, as you carry out the now murky water, You notice something floating in the bucket, a single sprig of lavender. Entirely unnecessary, entirely luxurious. You don't mention it. Back in the dormitory, the sisters are cleaning candle stubs and repurposing bits of wax for the evening vigil. Sister Euphemia gives you a sideways glance. "Well," she asks. You just shrug. "She has hot water." Euphemia grunts. "Doesn't surprise me. Once saw her with a lemon. A whole lemon. Just sitting there. Like it wasn't a sin." You want to smile, but instead you just change the subject. You've learned that the abbess's privileges, while technically sanctioned, are a sensitive topic. Some sisters envy, some rationalize, some pretend not to notice, but everyone knows. Still, you carry that image with you, the quiet grace of a private bath, the way the room smelled, the way no one rushed, the absence of cold. That night, you heat your own basin just a little longer over the stove. Add a single mint leaf to the rinse water. Fold your towel softer. No one sees, no one asks, and in that small moment, you create something rare in the convent. **** personal peace ***. Because while the rule may be unyielding, and the rota carved in habit and humility, there are always little pockets of grace, hidden corners, secret baths, and in those quiet waters, you wash away not sin, but the weight of saneness. You are not the abbess, but for tonight, your fingers are warm. The bells chime for a prime, but you're not heading to the chapel just yet. Not this morning. You're standing instead by the side door of the infirmary, holding a chipped clay bowl filled with warm water and a length of bleached linen. Not to wash yourself. Today, your task is different. You're to prepare Sister Hildegard for a confession. It's her week, and she's been troubled. She hasn't said why. She barely speaks at all anymore. But yesterday, she fainted during the evening prayers, and afterward, she asked not demanded, not even requested. Really. But murmur that she be washed before seeing the abbess. You've heard of this? Well, a kind of spiritual preparation. Some sisters believe that to cleanse the body before confessing is to show God your sincerity. Others call it superstition. Historians still debate whether these pre-confession washings were widely practiced or limited to mystic-prone convents. There's very little record of it. But then, many things that happened behind the convent walls were never written down. You step into Hildegard's cell. It's cool and dim. She's already seated on the cot, veil removed, sleeves rolled up. Her shift hangs loose round her bony shoulders. Her eyes do not meet yours. You kneel before her, dip the cloth in the bowl. The water has gone lukewarm. You start with her hands. They're cold, dry. You rub gently, working the cloth between her fingers, over her knuckles, round her wrists. She watches, silent. The lines round her mouth have deepened since winter. You wonder if she's eaten today. Then her face. You run the cloth along her cheekbones, careful to avoid her eyes. You don't know what she's done, if anything, but you treat her as you would the altar cloth. Carefully, reverently, with slow and quiet gestures. She exhales. You're not sure whether it's relief or regret. She speaks, almost inaudibly. Do you think God notices dirt? You pause. Only if it's ignored, you say. It just comes out. You're not sure what you mean, but it seems to be enough. She nods. You finish by drying her hands with your towel, the red-stitched one again. Now a little thinner than before, a little frayed along the edge. You'll mend it tonight, maybe later. As she walks with slow steps toward the abbess's quarters, you clean the bowl, rinse the cloth, and lay them out to dry. You don't mention what was said. That's not your place. But the moment lingers. There's something profound in washing another person. Something unsettling too. You start to understand why the early church linked *** cleansing and penance *** so closely. There's a reason people used to take ritual baths before baptism. Why priests still wash their hands before Mass. The act isn't just practical, it's symbolic. Bodily and spiritual boundaries blur, and for a few short minutes, all that matters is *** touch, water, and silence ***. You return to the laundry station later that day, and begin scrubbing the common garments again, this time more slowly. Your hands move with memory, not of Sister Hildegard's skin, but of the stillness she carried. The way her guilt seemed to lift, not gone, but softened after the wash. You think of your own last confession. 2 weeks ago, you admitted to falling asleep during Psalms. You admitted to envy. You didn't say the thing about wishing for 2 towels, or the thing about warming your basin with stolen embers. Those are still tucked inside you, folded and silent like your spare veil. You rinse a tunic in ash water, beat it gently against the stone. It makes a dull, rhythmic sound like breathing or chanting. Sister Justina walks past. She says nothing, but she lingers longer than usual, her eyes glancing toward the drying line. Later that night, she leaves a sprig of rosemary on your pallet. You know what it means. Another sister joins the confession list next week. You'll be called again, to wash, to serve, to witness, quietly, without knowing what you're seeing. And maybe that's the point. In the convent, you don't always know what's holy and what's habit. Sometimes the two are indistinguishable, like when you fold linen with reverence, or pour water with trembling hands. You don't need to know the sin, only the silence, only the cloth, only the cleansing. The evening air is thick with the smell of turnip soup and extinguished candles. You're on floor duty, sweeping the chapel hallway, when a sudden gust from the cloister door nearly knocks you sideways and brings something else with it. ***, a new novice. ***, she steps across the threshold like someone arriving from another world, which, in a sense, she has. You watch from the shadows as Sister Euphemia leads her inside, murmuring instructions in a hushed, practiced voice. The novice, barely 15, maybe holds a bundle of linen under one arm and looks everywhere but at anyone. Her eyes are wide, darting, overwhelmed. It's the expression you wore once, too. Before all of this became normal. You know what's coming. The initiation bath. Newcomers don't get the luxury of waiting for their rota. They bathe on arrival, not for comfort, but as part of the spiritual cleansing. A ritual, an erasure, dirt, perfume. Worldly oils all must go before one dons the holy habit. Historians still debate whether this first bath was more symbolic than hygienic. But you've seen it. It's both. There's reverence in the scrubbing, but also urgency. Like scrubbing not just dust from skin, but identity from memory. The novice is led behind the vestry, to the side basin normally used for foot washing. Sister Euphemia prepares the water warm, this time with a few drops of vinegar and sage. You're called in to help. She's already undressed down to her shift, clutching her towel plain white. No embroidery. Her hair is long and touched. A danger, a luxury, a target. You begin with her hands. Always the hands. You pour water over them gently, guiding her fingers apart like a child's. She flinches at the chill, but says nothing. Then her arms, her neck, her feet. Sister Euphemia does the hair cutting first, with shears dulled from years of repetition. You don't look away, but you don't stare either. When the last locks fall into the basin, the novice stares at them like they belong to someone else. Then comes the drying. You wrap her in the towel slowly, carefully. Her skin is pink from heat, her eyes glassy. It's not humiliation, at least. Not exactly. It's disorientation. The first moment when the self begins to unravel. You remember your own moment. The water in your ears. The prickling shame of nakedness under fluorescent moonlight. The quiet ache in your knees from kneeling too long afterward. Hair still dripping down your back. But this girl doesn't cry. She nods when spoken to, follows instructions, accepts the new undershift and veil without question. Later that evening, she walks into Compline with her head bowed. Her veil is slightly askew, She doesn't yet know how to pin it properly. She smells of sage and wet linen. You hear it before you feel it. A faint shift in the chapel's air. The sisters round her, those nearest, lean slightly back. One even clears her throat. Not rudely, just reflexively, because the smell of a newly bathed body in this place stands out. And in a world where sameness is sanctity, that's dangerous. You recall Sister Clothel's words. Asterisk eventually, we all start to smell alike. Asterisk, she didn't mean it cruelly. She meant it comfortingly. As in, the world's gone now. You're part of this, of us, of this sweetly sour, ever so slightly herbal cloud of sanctified sweat. But the novice doesn't know that yet. She probably spent last week washing with rosewater in a Stone Manor house. She's probably never used a towel, never shared bath water, never been watched as she dried her own hands. She will learn. You all did, and before long, she'll stop noticing. She'll join the rota. She'll sneak to the hearth at dawn to heat her basin, or barter chores for access to the mint leaves. She'll pick a mark to embroider on her towel. She'll develop opinions on linen stiffness and water temperature and whether ash paste or vinegar is more effective on sock stains. She'll become one of you. The metamorphosis begins with that first bath. A slow dissolving of name, scent, style, voice. You think of it like sandpaper, each repetition, each basin, each laundry shift, gently smoothing the person down into something smaller, rounder, quieter, not erased, just refined. Still, you wonder what traces remain inside the girls who never fully merged, the ones who left, or broke, or were sent away. You remember one, Sister Adeltrude. She used to hoard lavender under her mattress and smell it before morning prayer. She was gone within a year. No one said why. The novice's towel is drying on the line now next to yours, the red-stitched one. Theirs is blank. For now, you resist the urge to mark it. You don't want to hurry her loss. Let her keep her blankness. Just a little longer. Tonight, the hallway smells of beeswax and damp stone. You move slowly, candle in hand, past rows of silent cots. Every sister is asleep or pretending to be. You step lightly, careful not to disturb them. Not because you're afraid of reprimand, but because the stillness has its own authority here. You're not going to the washroom. Not tonight. You're going to the *** mortuary cell ***. There's been a death. Sister Laurentia passed just before Vespers. Peacefully, they say. In sleep. She'd been ill for weeks. Her voice whittled down to breath. Her steps soft as thread. When they found her hands were folded. A veil lay just so across her brow. You volunteered for the washing, not because it's easy, because it's important ***. In death, the body is prepared just as it was in life, with cloth, with water, with reverence. The final bath is the most sacred of all. You enter the small room. It's cool, with one narrow window and a low table in the center. Her body is there, covered in linen. Her hands are still folded, but looser now. Her face is pale, lips drawn back slightly, not a smile, not quite. You unwrap the cloth slowly. You've done laundry, you've helped with sick baths, you've even tended confession washings. But this is different. There is no expectation here. No modesty to preserve, no voice to whisper colder, please, or not so hard. There is only stillness. You dip your cloth in warm water, infused with bay leaf and myrrh. The smell is earthy, grounding. You start at the forehead. You wipe gently, downward, tracing the hollows of her cheeks, the slope of her nose, the curve of her chin. Her skin is cooler than you expect, but soft. You think of how many winters that skin endured, how many mornings it turned toward the cloister wind and did not complain. You continue, neck, shoulders, arms. The water trails down, carrying with it the last fragments of her earthly wear. Dust, wool, the faint outline of discipline. You wash her hands last. You wonder what they did. Those hands. How many rosaries counted? How many linens sewn? How many loaves of bread pulled from hot ovens? They are crooked now, knuckles swollen, nails short and cracked. You hold them longer than necessary. Finally, her feet. They're calloused, one toenail missing. You smile to yourself. Only in a convent would that feel familiar. You've washed your own feet in cold basins enough times to understand the pain in these toes. When she is clean, you dry her with a fresh towel, one from the cedar chest embroidered with white thread and used only for final washings. You fold it carefully over her chest. Another sister will wrap the body later, prepare her for burial. There will be prayers, candles, some sung in low harmony. But your part is almost done. You sit for a moment, just you and her. The candle flickers, the basin cools, the room is silent. You think about the hundreds of baths she must have taken. The frigid ones, the hurried ones, the ritual ones, the ones when no one was watching, and the ones when 3 were assigned to witness. All of them leading here, to this one, final, gentle. Historians still argue whether these ritual washings were remnants of older pagan customs or simply Christian compassion made practical. Whether they were acts of honor or obligation. You don't argue, you just do the work. You gather the cloths, pour the water into the garden trench, rinse the basin. Before you go, you press one sprig of rosemary into her folded hands. A small rebellion, technically not allowed, but she will tell. You step into the hallway again. The air feels different now, lighter. Back in the dormitory, the novice stirs in her sleep, whispering something about fire or feathers you can't tell. You tuck your red-stitched towel into your cloak pocket and lie down slowly. You close your eyes, and for the first time in a long while, you feel clean. And now, as we drift gently away from the stone corridors and candlelit halls of the convent, you begin to feel the weight of centuries fade from your shoulders. The quiet rustle of linen, the steam rising from old basins, the rhythm of hands on cloth, all of it softens, blurs, and melts into the silence of the night. The echo of bells grows distant. The scent of sage, vinegar, and wood smoke fades, and you no longer scrubbing, no longer shivering, simply float in the warmth of knowing that even the smallest acts can carry sacred meaning. That care, in its quietest form, can be a kind of prayer. Let the stone floors vanish beneath your feet. Let the candlelight flicker out, one flame at a time. Let the water still, the towels dry, and the whispered songs of washing dissolve into sleep. You're warm now, your hands are clean, your breath is slow, and somewhere far behind you, in a world sealed in silence and soothed by ritual, a bell tolls once more, not to wake you, but to say goodnight. Rest well, friend, you've earned it. End of script. Sweet dreams.